We're joined at the winter meeting of the nation's governors here in Washington by Governor Sarah Palin of Alaska. Thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Steve. It's an honor.
Let me ask you first, we've been talking to our viewers about the economy in their respective states. How is it in Alaska?
Our economy is doing well in Alaska. In fact, we have a budget surplus there in our state government. That's thanks to resource development that has really been ramped up, and thankfully it is a surplus time for Alaska, but it's all the more reason that we save our surplus and get ready for perhaps a rainy day when oil isn't nearly $100 a barrel, because of course about 85% of our budget is based on that price of oil.
One of the issues that continues to come up at these meetings, and it's written about this morning in the New York Times, either unfunded mandates or more pressure by the federal government, specifically with regard to some new Medicaid rules and the impact that that has on states. What impact does it have on Alaska? It
has impacts on every state, of course, and we certainly are for states' rights and less a mandate by the federal government. And certainly, as we're going through our budget process right now with our legislature, in the next month or two, we'll be wrapping up our budget. We're going to see those impacts. Again, thankfully, for Alaska's sake, we do have a surplus, and we can make up some of that shortfall that may result from federal actions, but we certainly hope that there aren't those shortfalls. It is a responsibility of the federal government to make sure that all citizens have opportunity for good health care, for that Medicaid coverage, Medicare coverage, and we certainly hope that they'll live up to their obligation and responsibility.
One of the areas of concern, though, that was brought up yesterday at the NGA meeting is that the Medicaid funds would no longer be used for the training of doctors.
Well, that's unfortunate. There in Alaska, we have a shortage of healthcare providers. We're many doctors short, and we're about 200 nurses short. We're doing all we can as a state to ramp up through our University of Alaska system seats open for medical and for healthcare provider positions. But I think that would be very, very unfortunate if doctors could not be trained with some of that funding from the federal government. There is a shortage.
Our guest is Alaska Governor Sarah Palin, and our phone lines are open. We do have one line set aside if you are up early in Alaska. That number to call is 202-628-0184. Again, 202-628-0184 for Alaska residents. I'm not sure if you had a chance to see the Washington Post this morning, but your state and the Exxon oil spill is a front-page story above the fold. Let me just read one excerpt of it. When a federal jury in Alaska back in 1994 ordered Exxon to pay $5 billion to thousands of people who had their lives disrupted by the massive Exxon Valdez oil spill, an appeal of the nation's largest punitive damages award was inevitable. But almost no one could have predicted the incredible round of legal ping-pong that only this month lands itself before the U.S. Supreme Court. And one of the points is that 14 years after that verdict, about 20% of the fishermen, Native Alaskans, and others that were impacted by this have all passed away.
Yeah, and March 23rd will mark the 19th anniversary of that very, very tragic spill, the largest oil spill in North America's history, very adversely impacting the state, our coastal communities, fishermen, the native population, many of our communities in Alaska and individuals. In fact, 32,000 Americans adversely affected, including the 20,000 Alaskans. So finally, 19 years later, in front of the Supreme Court, asking for justice. And the frustration that we have in Alaska after so many years of waiting for this damage to be paid by Exxon, of course at fault for the spill with a drunken captain that ran the Exxon Valdez ship into Bly Reef and spilled the 11,000 gallons of fuel. Very tragic, but most tragic is that many Alaskans, many Americans lose faith in the judicial system when it is justice delayed all these years. Again, 19 years after the spill, it's interpreted as justice denied. That's tragic. Very thankful, though, that finally on Wednesday we're in front of the Supreme Court to argue our side.
Will you be inside the Supreme Court when that argument is heard?
Our Attorney General from Alaska, Tallis Colberg, he'll be there.
Atlanta, Georgia, first up. Good morning to you, caller.
Good morning. I was just saying that I'm happy that they have a good economy, and she better hope George Bush doesn't find out about it or he'll swoop it up.
You know, that's a good point. I know what you're saying. What Alaska is trying to do right now, what my administration is committed to do, is become more of a contributing state, though, more of a producing state, less reliant on the federal government. We're a young state. This year we turn 50 years old. We lack some infrastructure, but we're very, very wealthy in our natural resources. And if we're provided the opportunity and the ability to develop those natural resources very safely, very responsibly, honestly, and ethically, then we will be less reliant on the federal dole. That's my mission. That's my goal, is to get Alaska to be in a position of contributing more to the U.S. and helping to secure the United States also with safe, clean domestic supplies of energy, including trillions of cubic feet of natural gas that is waiting to be tapped and flow into these markets across the U.S. that are very, very hungry for domestic, clean supplies of energy.
Next call from Hollywood, Florida on the Republican line. Good morning.
Good morning. This is for the governor. Madam, I shipped with Chevron to out of Kenai Peninsula. You have sweet crude up there. It's a very high quality oil, and I know that ANWR is it's got a lot of oil, and it would be an immediate solution to our problems with the oil, and bring our economy right back to positive immediately. But the American people seem to be against it. But today's technology, we were very cautious 40, 50 years ago when I was shipping, but today's technology, we're a lot better. And I think it would be advantageous to Alaska and to the American nation for the ANWR to be opened up. But the people just don't want to do it, and they don't realize that when they turn on a light switch, that electricity is coming from Venezuela or from the Middle East, and they've got us held hostage. We've got to get out of that situation.
Oh, you are so spot on. I absolutely agree with you. You know, the footprint that we're looking at, hopefully being able to drill in ANWR at some point, it's a 2,000-acre footprint. That's smaller than the footprint of, say, LAX. It's not that much land. And yes, we have to quit being so reliant on foreign sources of energy. Currently, Americans spend $400 to $500 billion a year in countries that aren't real friendly to America to import supplies of fuel, when again Alaska is sitting on reserves of oil and natural gas that should be tapped. In fact, what we're doing in our administration also is trying to create an open, competitive environment up there in our North Slope Basin, inviting responsible entities to come in and really compete for the right to tap those resources so that we are less reliant on dangerous, unstable foreign supplies of energy.
Anchorage, Alaska is our next caller for your governor. Good morning.
Yes, good morning, Governor. I'm your favorite Democratic supporter.
Thank you.
I'm a big Democrat and a big supporter of you. I have a question on our last lease sale, the offshore Chukchi Sea sale. It was several $billion, but the state of Alaska won't receive a dime of that. Shouldn't the federal government be putting a portion of that into how it affects the native villages on the slope?
Absolutely.
In the Chukchi Sea area?
Thank you. And Governor, can you explain the issue for those who are not familiar with it?
Well, absolutely. We have a federal lease that recently took place, and that's in the Chukchi Sea area where we will have offshore drilling. And yeah, Alaska was exempt some years ago from receiving any kind of revenue shares from those offshore drilling prospects. Other states, other coastal states do receive OCS offshore revenue shares. Alaska being exempt at the time, we need to promote and support and fight hard for some revenue share also so that we can fund some of the mitigation impacts that have to be taken place here in our coastal communities, our native communities, mitigation in terms of any kind of impacts with the drilling. Also, climate change impacts, erosion, those type of things can be funded with a share of the offshore leasing funds. Unfortunate that Alaska was exempt, but our congressional delegation and the coastal states whom we had supported to receive some OCS revenue shares years ago should be supporting us now in trying to get our state into that program also.
As you well know, a couple of years ago, a lot of discussion and debate in your state about moving the capital from Juneau to Anchorage. What's the status of that?
Still a lot of debate about moving. At this point, it's moving the legislative session. We have a 90-day legislative session annually, and you know, a lot of Alaskans want to access their lawmakers and the process, a legislative process. Currently, Juneau is inaccessible in terms of any kind of road access. You have to take a ferry or you have to fly to our capital, and that's kind of cumbersome and it's expensive. So there's debate right now on how to make it a more accessible capital, how to make the legislature more accessible so that more Alaskans can participate. About 80% of the population of Alaska doesn't have the opportunity to physically be there testifying and keeping an eye on our lawmakers and this administration and making sure that everybody is doing things on the up and up.